Hello, everyone. Welcome to the You Don't Look Like an Engineer podcast. Today we have...
The synchronization is on point.
It's usually really hard, but you go, Sohan.
Today's guest, Pursuit, Passion and Promise Emerging Leader of 2023. Fiona McDonald. That is, a bit of a mouthful, but incredible.
Yeah.
Congratulations, first of all.
Congratulations, Fiona.
Thanks, thanks for having me. Thank you.
I guess the first thing that we're going to ask you is to give us a little bit of an introduction, who Fiona is, and how she ended up being the PPP award winner this year.
Yeah, totally. Well, I suppose, should I kind of go back into time, back to my university days? I studied environmental science. I did my master's in environmental science and majored in geospatial mapping and all the things GIS and environmental modelling. And I suppose originally I was starting to think I might want to work in the mines, but then I managed to land a job with infrastructure in Canberra, the Federal Department of Infrastructure and Transport. And I started off in the GIS team as a graduate and was working there and really enjoyed it. And I think while I was there, I worked quite closely with New South Wales Roads teams, and they did a lot of the programming for the funding. And at the time, there was a bunch of the flooding going on up in the north and a bit in Queensland. And so I was doing a lot of the mapping there for where the flood waters might be affecting the projects. What I realised during that time is I actually liked the project side of things more than just the GIS side. So once I finished my graduate year, I actually applied and moved across into the project team. And so I was helping manage the federal program for spending money on the New South Wales roads, and really, really enjoyed it, doing all the program management side of things there, and did that for about 2 and a bit years. And then kind of decided, like most Australians do, got itchy feet and wanted to go travelling. So I moved to the UK where I managed to land a job with National Highways as a project manager on the A14 Cambridge to Huntingdon Improvement Scheme, where I worked on a lot of project innovation, and was looking at managing the designated funds program over there, where they kind of got additional funding to do innovative, cool bits on the project, from autonomous dumper truck trials to putting in new cycleways and other kind of flood mitigation things that were innovative. Working there, I really kind of got to be on site and work closely with both the designers as well as the contractors, having worked in the federal government, which is quite distant from that, and really, really kind of enjoyed that side of things. So when I moved back to Australia, kind of at the start of COVID, I was really looking for a role where I could kind of be closer to the contractors. And there I got embedded with a company called Elton Consulting, but I got embedded into the Langer Rourke team and worked on the 2020 bushfire cleanup program, which had kind of all happened at the beginning of that year. And so really got some insights into that contractor side of things. Also working on a project where it was really fast paced. We were kind of designing and delivering it at the same time, which was kind of a really unique experience to be very fast paced, had to be very innovative in order to solve all the problems on that project. Did my time on that project as that started to come to an end, was looking for the next opportunity. And that's where I saw a role going with Transport for New South Wales as a project development manager with them, and was managing the drive upgrade out in Western Sydney, and took that through concept design. Really cool, got me that kind of state government level experience, which then when that finished, through the concept phase, I moved into an industry affairs role with Transport for New South Wales, because I think I really started to see that I really like that stakeholder management side of project management, less the budgets and programs. So moving into industry affairs has been amazing, because it's just pretty much solely that stakeholder management side. So working very closely with Transport's senior leadership team and managing those relations. And I think at the beginning of this year, when the Roads Australia PPP awards started coming out, and I saw that it was all around projects, creating your own project and using the platform for something, I was encouraged by my team to put in a nomination, because I think they always see me kind of getting on my soapbox and talking about different things, particularly around innovation. And so I pulled together an application and then was lucky enough to win it this year. So that's been pretty much my journey up until kind of getting the RA award at the start of this year.
Wow, I'm surprised you kept that under like so short. That's such a good timeline. I was like, wow, she's taking us from the start to now. Wow.
I suppose it's that thing of I'm STEM, but I'm technically not an engineer. So I feel like when you don't look like an engineer, not an engineer, but I think I might, my original kind of studies and stuff are kind of close with the GIS.
I love that, in particular, because you actually said it, like you're not an engineer, you come from a science background, and I was going to ask you that. And see whether you had any issues with like credibility, because the engineering world is sort of like, they love being engineers and that's part of their identity, part of our identity. So have you
Yeah,
struggled with
definitely.
that?
Yeah, a little bit. If I'm honest, I think sometimes when I kept referring to myself as a fake engineer in my past roles, sometimes I think being a project manager, the engineering skill set is really good because it gives you that subject matter expertise. But a lot of the project management skills that come from people, budget management, program management, you can actually bring from a lot of other backgrounds. So I've worked with a lot of other really good project managers that have come from business or communications backgrounds that have been absolutely amazing project managers too, which is why I think this sector is really cool to work in because of that diversity.
And obviously it's needed for project management, but it sounds like you love working with people and being on that side of things. And for that, yeah,
Totally.
your basic skill set is people skills.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Definitely, I'd try to be.
What I'm really, really curious about is if you go back to, when you were little, or if a few years back, where do you think your love for creation and innovation kind of started, and how did that happen?
Yeah, I think it's probably what drew me into science originally, is that kind of inquisitive mind, that problem solving, and that kind of setting up challenges or hypothesis that you can kind of try and find a solution to or overcome. It's definitely the side of that innovation. But I think the bit that I like about working in the infrastructure sector is being part of something bigger than yourself. And I think when you kind of working on big projects and things, I love being able to kind of, when I bore my family and friends often with being like, oh, I kind of helped my token little bit on that bit of that road project or something. And I'm knowing that I was part of something that's going to leave a legacy in the city that we're helping shape is something that really motivates me. And being able to help kind of do that more innovatively and more productive is definitely something that's been kind of a passion that's definitely underlies in most of the stuff I do.
I've got to say, and Lauda, correct me if my memory is wrong, but I don't think I've heard too many of our guests talk about being conscious of their legacy.
No, not really.
Yeah.
And that was
incredible.
Yeah, that is really incredible. When I was recently, last week actually, that I got that award, I was asked what I wanted my legacy to be, and I was like, I genuinely didn't know. I was like, this is a hard question because I'm pretty young. No, like,
yeah.
But yes, so that's really interesting. So, I guess from a values point of view, where does that come from? Like, because you like very creative and intrigued or curious. Is that something that you learned when you were growing up, or is it something that you part of the core values in your family?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's always been challenged to give things a go. I think a lot of my family has always been like, don't just kind of do something because you're good at it. Go and do something because you're giving it a go. Give it your all. And if you're going to turn up, give 100%. And I think that's kind of the way I've taken it into any kind of job and career kind of path that I've done, which has kind of favoured me well. And I think just because you're not good at something, and I think that's why I kind of stuck it out in this industry, just because I'm not an engineer doesn't mean that I can't give it a go and can't contribute. And I probably bring a different perspective than maybe some of the other rooms when I've walked into a room full of engineers. It kind of brings a different flavour to it. And sometimes they look at me blankly and it's kind of like, where are you coming from? But other times like, oh, wow, it's actually a different perspective, which is a bit refreshing.
Sohan, you want to go, or can I go?
I did, but it's a bit of a segue. You talked about being, in all these different roles and different rooms. My first curiosity was going to be working here and working in, the UK. Is there a big difference in just, I suppose, the work environment or even perception of what engineers are up to?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think the UK government in particular, there's a lot of encouragement for innovation. So like I said, when I was managing the program in the UK, there's a program called the Designated Funds Program, where government's shaved off at a kind of what their equivalent of the British government at a federal kind of level in Australian terms. They've shaved off a piece of funding that's called designated funds, and it's ring fenced, and projects can bid to get additional funding for their project for innovative ideas. So they'll go through a selection panel and get that. And so to me, by that kind of separate funding outside of your project budget in order to encourage innovation is really signalling that they're really open for business on that innovation side of things, which I found really interesting, having had the experience in Australia where we kind of are still doing things, the kind of business as usual, this is funding, what you've written in your spec is what you're going to get kind of thing. Whereas over there, they're kind of pushing the boundaries a bit more. From that perspective, I learned a lot about the different ways of doing things, which I've then been able to bring back into my current role.
Would you say the best way to affect change from just the way they're approached is that change really should be a more of a top-down approach?
Yeah, I'd say that it's from both ways. I think that's when you're going to get a lot of change. And I suppose as part of my Roads Australia award, which I probably didn't mention at the beginning, was as part of the project, I'm rolling out a series of interviews over the course of the year where I'm interviewing kind of innovation champions from across the sector, from government, designers, contractors, what's called a organizational psychologists and things like that. And I'm kind of hearing like lots of different perspectives on innovation. And I think innovation, one of the kind of catch cries that I was hearing from a lot of them, innovation is change that adds value. So it doesn't need to be this big industry shaping piece. It can just be this incremental change, which you can do at the bottom. You don't need you don't need top level managers and leadership in order to change that. If you're looking at some form that you're filling out for your quality checks on a regular basis and there's something that's like some pain point in it that you make it a little bit faster or more efficient, you're being innovative in what you're doing. You don't need to go and reinvent a whole system in order to do something or employ some new technology into the project in order to do it. You can just be as simple as a Word document or something that you're reshaping and reframing to make it more fit for purpose, and you'll get productivity and innovative gains from doing that. I'd still be empowering people at the bottom in order to give it a go. It's not just necessarily needing to wait for people at the top to tell you what to do. Yeah.
Wow. I really like that because it gives a lot of responsibility even to the young people, and it's refreshing to hear, because sometimes you're like wondering whether you're contributing or like, making a change. And sometimes we underestimate, our automation, as you said, like the automation that we do use to reduce the effort that a task takes by just, organizing a spreadsheet better or things like that. And I like that because sometimes we overlook that in the industry.
Yeah. And I think you're always on the hunt for the big win, whereas like a lot of little wins will add up to the big one. So you don't need to jump straight to the big one. And often the big one's the scary one. People might not want to do that, whereas the little kind of changes along the road, those incremental changes, you would actually start to help shape the industry by doing them. And so I think everyone's got a part to play in that.
Oh, very, very empowering. Okay, so maybe you were saying that, because I want to ask you about what you're currently doing and the difference between the role that you were doing with funding. So what do you enjoy more? Working with engaging communities and people? And why do you sort of like enjoy that more?
Yeah, so at the moment, I suppose so when I was doing the bushfire program, that was working directly with the community. And so I'd partner up with an engineer and we'd go out to the community and we would check what they needed cleaned up from their property, and we'd work together to make sure. And then we'd work with the subcontractors who'd do the cleanup work and make sure that it all went according to plan and managed quite distressed community members throughout that project. I suppose now, if I pivot to my role now as Industry Affairs and Partnerships Senior Manager at Transport, my role is actually manage quite senior stakeholders. So I manage our senior leadership team at Transport to work closely with the Australian Constructors Association as well as Consult Australia and all of the senior leaders from those companies, and look at how we can bring all the parties together to kind of look at the challenges that industry is facing in a tripartite relationship and see how we might be able to find solutions to them and what's negotiable and how government can come to the table as well as industry in order to try and solve them. So from that side, I see it as kind of a problem to be solved and a challenge to try and see where's negotiable, what can we kind of do to help solve them. And I really enjoy earlier this week, we had our second workshop bringing everyone together this year, and we got some really good insights. And I love hearing the kind of people, when they get given the chance and the space and the time to think innovatively of solutions, they come up with some really interesting stuff. So, and it allows the conversation to change rather than it just kind of be at a stalemate of both, industry saying government needs to do something, government saying, no, we can't. It allows to look at where there is room to move and have those kind of more in-depth conversations and really rich conversations around how we can make things more productive for both sides.
You're sitting in these rooms with all these leaders. Firstly, as a listener, I did want to clarify one thing. What is an innovation champion?
So innovation champions, it depends on who you speak to and which state and territory you're in. Some states like Queensland, you have innovation champions at Department of Transport and Main Roads. They have got an innovation champion in their senior leadership team.
Okay.
And they kind of help push and look for innovations to kind of bring up in the sector within Queensland. But if you look at other individual companies, some people it's self-appointed. They want someone who's naturally passionate about on a project. And so they kind of naturally champion it through just their day-to-day.
Yeah. And secondly, now that you're like sitting with the leadership teams, what do you feel is like lacking in these conversations that needs to be, I suppose, changed, whether in mindset or conversation to help?
Yeah, definitely. I think I've experienced a lot and I've learned a lot over this year because I get to have a seat at the table when these meetings are happening. And I really enjoy hearing and learning about the kind of discussions and the pain points that there are for them, because I think having had the experience when I was a project manager, what you see as the day-to-day stresses on your project as far as an industry issue goes, they're very different. So you might have, the budget or a bit of an overspend here. Overall, it kind of rolls up and it seems like you're fighting fires on that level. So I think at that higher level industry perspective, when you've got all the leaders in the room, there's definitely a different level of conversation, which I've really enjoyed to kind of hear. As far as what they might do differently, I just think that keeping the conversation happening, and that's what I really feel like is my role at Transport, is to kind of create the space for these conversations. And through making sure that the right people in the room. If we're talking about sustainability, we've got the sustainability experts in there. You know, if we're talking about commercial issues, we've got the commercial people in the room. I think sometimes if you haven't got the right people in the room for the conversation, that might be where it doesn't quite get the desired outcomes that you're hoping for.
This might be a question we might have edited out later, but I'm just curious: is there a lot of gender diversity at those tables with senior leadership?
Not really, and it needs a lot of work.
Okay.
I think it definitely needs a lot of work, and it's something that we've had pointed out again and again, that there definitely needs to be. At Transport, we're trying to kind of lead the charge on that one and making sure that we're kind of setting targets and working towards them and making sure that we are getting that diverse leadership. But I think, it's definitely not necessarily reflected on all sides.
And given that you might be a minority and you're sitting with all these leaders, have you ever perceived that there's pushback on your suggestions, opinions?
No, not that I've felt to date. I've definitely experienced it in the past. In my current role, no. I think that a lot of it is I'm actually supported because I think they're getting the benefit out of the space that we're creating, and they know that I'm going to be able to help them bring together the right people in the room, and so I feel quite empowered to do that in my current role.
Do you have someone that helps you as an ally or someone that sort of like has you back?
Yeah, definitely. So the industry engagement team that I work in, so we're the Transport's industry engagement and development team. We have got a bunch of people from various backgrounds, people who've had on-site experience, people with a lot of communications experience, people who've come from various parts of the industry, and we all really work together and have each other's back as we're kind of developing this kind of program of work on how we're going to engage industry and have a better partnership with our industry partners. And so I think from that we really support each other, as well as we get a lot of support from Transport senior leadership team. So they've really empowered us, particularly Camilla Drover, who's our Deputy Secretary. She has really empowered our team to kind of do what we're doing, because I think she's really sees the benefit in how we can better partner with industry. So
absolutely,
that really helps us.
It sounds like such a positive place to be.
Yeah, you'll be jealous. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. I am intrigued because you were sharing a little bit about the project that you came up with for Roads Australia. I wanted to sort of like, if you can, and if you would like to share into more detail of, what the application process was like for you, and also was this project something that you had already had in the back then, like an idea that you were thinking about, or did it just occur to you and you saw it like it started from the scratch?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I suppose like the application process itself is just pulling together a program that I'd be able to achieve. And I suppose the key bit is you've got to do it on top of your day job, so it's not biting off too much. And I'm like, I could reinvent the whole world if I, was given the time and the space. At least I'd try anyway. And I think it was trying to think of something that was doable on top of my day job. And I think a lot of it, I attended the Roads Australia gala dinner and their emerging marketing leaders workshop earlier in the year, where a lot of it was around this lessons learnt piece and lessons learnt sharing that our industry, quite frankly, is pretty rubbish at. And I think even when I've done my interviews across the whole of the country, no one's really been able to give me a best practice example. There was better practice, but nothing that's been best practice for how to do lessons learned sharing. And so I kind of took that concept and then looked at how I might be able to apply that to innovation and innovation sharing and sharing of that stuff. So that's where I've kind of come up with the idea of doing interviews as well as a survey that I put out through RA's members, and then pulling it together into a high-level findings report to share what I'm hearing, and so that we can kind of share those learnings across the industry. So I had the natural passion for innovation. It's something that I've been kind of, whenever I kind of naturally seem to gravitate towards, no matter what role I'm in, but then being able to apply that and do that lessons learned focus of it. And I suppose, and the interviews, I just kind of did one every couple of months, and I was able to do that on top of my day job without it being too burdensome. And then now in this month, I've just been rapidly trying to write up all my findings that I've gathered throughout the year.
Oh, that's really exciting. When is it finishing?
So I think my tenure finishes in maybe mid next year.
Okay,
I think I got the award at the end of March this year. So I'll be looking at presenting the findings report. I'm hoping to finish this year and then present it to the board in the first part of 2024.
Oh, we wish you all the best.
And then is there something they implement at the end of it, or it's just present your findings and that's
So as part of the report, I'm putting a bunch of recommendations towards Roads Australia to see what that they might be able to take forward, and hopefully kind of keep the conversation going, which is the aim. I'm hoping this is kind of an initiation or spark that will start the conversation to go further, as well as kind of sharing the learnings more widely across, and hopefully the paper will eventually be able to get shared, to be able to kind of share it, and so people can kind of, I'm trying to write it in a digestible format so that people can just take the nuggets out of it without getting, having some 50-page document that's
overwhelming.
I was like, I'm not going to bother reading that. Yeah. As well as telling the stories that I've been hearing. So the peppering through some case studies and quotes throughout it, so that people will be able to kind of see their experiences within it as well.
Storytelling is very, very, very powerful. It's just as a means of changing opinions and also learning. Okay, so there is a lot of, granted, 100% innovation should be approached top down and bottom up, but like you said, like we were talking about earlier, there's a lot of, mindset shifts that need to go around about it. And if there's say someone listening and they're, trying to make all these changes at their workplace and say it's not really happening, what would you recommend them to, I suppose, approach, and who say they don't have an innovation champion? How do you recommend that they should, make a change in their workplace?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it was something, that kind of quote that I had from one of the interviewees that I kind of spoke to earlier, is people hear the term innovation and it's a bit overused now, I think, and also, or it can be perceived as really kind of scary and big and, oh gosh, we don't want to do that because it's going to end up with the robots ruling the world. I think the way to think about it is improvement, and no one can really argue with improvement. Everyone wants to improve things, make them better, whether it's culturally, efficiency, productivity, sustainably. So I think if you start to switch people's mindsets into improving things, rather than it being innovation, that might help with some of the conversations that you're having. Because if you start to say, oh, we want to improve something rather than we want to be innovative, it starts to be a different kind of conversation. At least that's from the experiences that I've been hearing from the different people that I've been interviewing. Changing that language around it would be a first step.
I love that, because it's all in the delivery, and I wonder whether that came from engaging with communities and trying to, share with them what's happening.
Yeah.
You've managed to jump into so many different roles. I am curious as to your mindset or headspace before you get into them. Do you ever feel like you take up something because you feel ready for it, you've reached a point where you're like, this is what I'm ready for and this is my next step? Or is it more so it's a great learning opportunity, I can develop so much, let me just jump in and we'll sort out the rest later?
It's varied from role to role that I've done. I found I've just kind of gone for roles that kind of piqued my interest. I'm like, oh, what's that about? Let me have a go. I just want to see what, and it usually starts off with I try and go have a chat with the manager or someone in the team to kind of see what's the day-to-day look like for you guys, because particularly when I've changed from doing GIS behind the computer pretty much all by myself, speaking to someone through a phone, to then jumping into project world where you're managing stakeholders, to then kind of moving overseas, that was probably a pretty big jump. I remember thinking, I gave myself 3 months when we moved overseas. I dragged my husband, then boyfriend, now husband, with me over there. He came too. And I remember we said, we'll give ourselves till Christmas to see if we can get a job. And I was like, and then we'll come back to Australia because it's not working. So it was a stressful 3 months to try and look for work and kind of in a different environment and different ways of doing things. I think over in when I first moved to the UK, LinkedIn had really blown up there where it wasn't as big in Australia when I kind of left. And that kind of idea of needing to use that as your kind of profile and sell yourself on that was a bit of a change to how I had to do something. And it was that kind of thing. It felt a bit silly at first, but then you kind of start to learn the skills around how to do it. Whereas, and start to not feel so uncomfortable about doing it. And that self-promotion piece, which I think particularly as women, sometimes we find it quite challenging to kind of sell ourselves. So I think that was a learnt behaviour. And even now, sometimes you still feel a bit uncomfortable about doing it, but it's that kind of fake it till you feel it kind of thing. Yeah, so moving to the UK was probably one of the scariest ones. Just threw myself into it. It was something I always knew I wanted to do, wanted to go live overseas, give it a go. Also see a different way of doing things, and I really found that having lived in a different country has opened up my mind to, they've still got roads, the transport network's there and there's cars on them, but there's just a slightly different way of getting to the end result. And so being able to kind of bring that back into Australia and kind of seeing how we do things differently, knowing to be able to think outside the box a bit more has been really different. I'm not sure whether that really answered your question about whether
a bit of both.
You said that you pick something when whether it interests you or not, basically, and then you go from there. And
Definitely.
yeah, long-winded.
Yeah, no, it's really nice to hear, and it's good. So that it's good that you mentioned the self-promoting thing, because I think there's this misconception that sometimes you're just born confident and that's it, whereas in reality confidence is something that you develop and you learn. It's just like that innovative way of thinking, so it's really relieving to hear that. So what would you advise to someone to develop those type of traits, like to be a little bit more confident and to think innovatively?
Two very different questions. I think to think innovatively is just, I suppose it's just thinking about different ways of doing things. And I suppose just because it's the way it's been done before doesn't necessarily mean it's bad to do it slightly differently. People kind of go, that's the way I've done it before, we'll just do it. And so there might be a more efficient way of doing things. And I think in your everyday life, you're trying to look for ways to do things more efficiently, so you're not taking too long to do them. So I'd like to think that everyone's got a little innovator inside them that wants to kind of come out and to kind of share their ideas. And so I think for leaders, it's about creating the space for people to share those ideas and making sure that people are comfortable. And then when you are in a team and someone is creating the space for you to do that, don't be scared to not share, because the hardest bit is particularly when leaders are opening up the space and no one shares their ideas, or they think they're going to say the wrong thing. So it's around that kind of idea of, using the space when it's given to you, which is, I think, what I've done. And sometimes now I've gotten more confident, kind of push myself into those situations to share my ideas. But it definitely wasn't always the way. I remember being kind of quiet and sitting there and worried I was going to say the wrong thing, whereas now I've kind of gotten a bit more confident and less scared to do that now. But there's definitely some situations where I still am.
It's scary.
But does part of it also come with experience in the industry? So obviously you'd have to have done things a few times for you to realize how it needs to be improved.
Exactly.
Yeah. I definitely think one of the things was, I spoke to someone in one of my interviews that I did, was around, would you be more ashamed to kind of say, we didn't even try, or we did try and it failed, and that kind of thinking. And I was like, it was like, we didn't even try. Like, to me, that's kind of, why did we not give it a go? Whereas we tried, it failed, you know what, we learned something. So now I'm not going to try something else. So I suppose that's kind of the mindset, is you may as well kind of give it a go, and then kind of see what you go.
There is one thing I'm curious about this industry is, like, obviously in many aspects, it is somewhat a race to the bottom for, bidding for projects, and everything gets very tight. So the space for innovation and, having it needs a bit of, leeway to, okay, we're it might take a little bit longer to develop or whatever, but it's better in the long run. How much is that stifled with this approach? And are we how does
Yeah,
that work?
yeah. I think we're starting to see it in different states and territories across Australia with different approaches to the contracting models and things like that to encourage innovation. I interviewed the team on the level crossing removal project in Victoria, and I think they've got 110 very similar rail projects, kind of interfacing with roads that they're having to do, and so they're able to use this kind of program approach they've created down there to kind of take learnings from each one onto the next one. And that's really cool because they're able to apply that innovation, and that's all through the program rather than kind of tendering each project individually. So that program approach that they're applying to that project's allowing for it. And then I've also interviewed the people in Sydney on the Ringa Freeway upgrade, and I found that project was interesting because sometimes they say innovation, you kind of actively choose to do it, or the constraints of the project force you to do it. And very much the latter on the Ringa Freeway. For those that don't know what that is, it's the major road that goes across the Harbour Bridge. And they're doing a bit of a widening and a lane readjustment on that project at the moment. But as part of the tender process for that, they put out an ask for innovations in order to kind of how people might be able to meet that, because there isn't enough space for a big compound and things like that on that project site in the project corridor. So they were looking for different ways to do that. It's a high residential area, so they're going to have to be a lot quieter, really, really high traffic. So there was a lot of constraints on that project. And so they were going to have to be and forced to be innovative on that project. So I think as we're kind of looking at different kinds of projects and the different ways of doing things, the tender models and things like that they're using across the country are really allowing that flexibility to include innovation in them, which is exciting to see.
Absolutely. Going back to what you were saying about the way you sort of like approach things and the way you jump onto projects or roles, I remember you saying something about having a conversation with someone and seeing how they got to where they got. And I found that really helpful, especially for young professionals, or even if you're going through a period in your life where you don't really know where you're heading professionally. Happens to all of us at some point. And I just wanted to sort of like ask you if you had any advice for someone that was like really struggling, or they didn't really know, and they were afraid of contacting someone, and if you had anything to share for them.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I've had a lot of mentors throughout my career, whether they're old bosses that I've had or through formal mentoring programs that whatever company or agency that I was in had established. And then there was literally people that I had just seen and I thought, you know what, they're really cool. How did they get to where they are? And I just kind of, as cringe as it is, sent them a cold email and said, is there any chance you would mind either being my mentor or just having a one-off coffee catch up? And I think it takes a little bit of guts to do that, but what's the worst they can say? The worst they can say is no. And if anything, I think I've never had someone say no. I've definitely had people who are more time poor, but they've usually made some time to have a chat with me, which has been great. But I think when you go to those chats, it's going in prepared and what you want to have the conversation about. Don't just kind of go in there and go, oh, can you give me a job? It's more around asking them about them, their career, what learnings you can take away from it. As well as maybe some of the challenges that you're facing in your current role that they might be able to provide some guidance on. So kind of going in a bit prepared, help foster those relationships as well. And I think now that I'm getting a little bit more into my career, I've started mentoring other people. Currently I mentor one of our transport has an Aboriginal mentoring program for vet cadets that have come into the department, and so I've interviewed mentoring one of the Aboriginal cadets on that program, and she's absolutely excelling at her job, and I think I almost learned just as much from her as I feel like I'm passing on in mentoring. So from that relationship, some mentors, what you're giving to them, you may be giving some nuggets to them as what it's like for someone underneath them to kind of learn from as well. So I think it's a two-way street. It's not just a one-way thing as well. So think about what you have to offer too.
Yeah, it's an elegant currency thing. I think that's what they call it, right? Oh, that's so cool.
I've heard that before. That's very cool.
The elegant currency.
Yeah.
I was told by a guy from work here, and we were chatting, and he was pretty much just asking me questions about my career direction, and he was like, "This is called the elegant currency," and I was like, "Well, you teach me everything, don't you?" Anyway, I want to ask you about a little bit more about the skills that someone that is working in community engagement requires, because I'm really curious about that world. And for someone that wanted to join, what do you think they have to sort of like work on like what do they have to focus on? Because I feel like sometimes in the engineering world we don't really go and engage with communities at the right time, especially when planning. We don't really go there. And what do you think we should work on?
Yeah. I'm definitely not the most experienced in this in community engagement, but I did do it for close to a year when I was working on the bushfires. And I think the key thing is to have empathy and kind of think about it. What if it was you in their shoes? A lot of the time is having that self-awareness. It's like, yeah, sure, I wanted to get in and we had targets we had to meet. We had to clean up a certain amount of properties over the time. But if you go in with that kind of, a bullet a gate approach, you're not going to get that much rapport from the community members. They're not going to be as helpful. They're going to be standoffish. So a lot of it's around bringing that empathy to the conversation experience. So similar to if you're going to go and consult on a road that might be going through someone's property and you might need to acquire their land, or you're going to be increased noise disruption. It's really going into those conversations around having that empathy of what it's like to be in their shoes, and you'll kind of come to the conversation a lot more open-minded rather than going, I've got a job to do, you're in the way of me doing it, kind of thing. Yeah.
Empathy, a big one in leadership as well.
Yes, definitely.
Do you consider yourself a leader right now?
Depends on who you ask. I may be an emerging leader.
I think you are.
I think I'm not quite there yet, but definitely something that I aspire to. But I think you can be a leader at any level. I think with what teams I've kind of managed in the past, you can have young graduates who are really leading their work and taking ownership of it and really pushing it forward. And that I wouldn't underestimate the ability to upwards manage and that kind of thing and help shape the direction of the team that you're in. If you're kind of showing that kind of proactive nature and things like that, I think you can really be, as much as it's a cliche to say, a leader at any level. You don't just have to wait for that top-down direction.
How would you explain to someone what the difference between stakeholder management and community engagement is?
Yeah, so I suppose stakeholder management, and it's something we often debate in our team. So we have stakeholder management and stakeholder engagement. So management is you're just managing the stakeholders. So you kind of, this is what we perceive it as, is you just kind of pushing, usually communications is one way. You're kind of just telling them what's happening. You're keeping them informed. They know what's going on. Whereas engaging them is you're bringing them into the tent with you and you're actually having a two-way conversation where you're actually kind of taking them on the journey with you. You're hearing their thoughts and their concerns, their challenges, as well as them learning about what yours are, and you're kind of building the solution together. Whereas I think when you're just managing someone, you're keeping them informed, which is great. And there's some places where that's appropriate and other times where you might want to actually engage them and kind of actually learn and have your finger on the pulse of the issues.
I had those questions in my head. I don't know if we're going to keep them, but I wanted answers.
Maybe I feel like, okay, there's a mixed bag. Obviously, people who are very good at dialogue and engagement and that sort of thing in the engineering field, very people-oriented. But for someone who is maybe not so great at that aspect, how would you recommend them to, I suppose, improve their dialogue and be able to be seen as a leader and be able to manage people as well?
I'm a big fan of don't fake it. Like if you don't feel it, it's going to become really obvious. So don't kind of push yourself to be something that you're not. And because you've seen that, I think we've all seen leaders where they kind of feels a bit forced and it doesn't feel true. And then that's not relatable. Whereas there'll be other people in the industry who may not be as verbose and things like that as maybe you are. And so by being yourself and your own personal brand and kind of selling that in your leadership style, then there'll be other people that'll really resonate with, I think. Whereas if you're trying to fake it and so you've all kind of got to do the big rah-rah up the front each day, that might be not everyone's kind of cup of tea either. So some people might want the more really detailed focused leader. And so I think kind of be true to yourself because it's exhausting trying to be something that you're not either. So, and being a leader is exhausting. So you don't want to add the two together and you just burn yourself out.
Yeah, authenticity is a big thing. Especially when, like, in projects, if you don't have authentic conversations with the people that you're managing or the people that you're reporting to, you could get in trouble. And your reputation could actually be ruined at the end. It's collateral for sure. I want to ask you about your diversity and inclusion involvement. Firstly, I want to ask you what diversity means to you. I'm really curious to know.
Diversity. I think diversity means that everyone's equal and you're getting someone representation from what society looks like. So you're not just kind of got the same cardboard cut out of the same people over and over again. You've got more representation of the societies where our projects are being built through. I think that's probably true diversity, where and everyone as part of that has kind of an equal say.
I went to this event once, and I think someone said, you know how you have a stakeholder when you have projects, you have different stakeholders. It's sort of like the same. You want to have everyone involved. We want to have everyone at the table. So when did you start sort of like realizing the power that you as an individual had in creating change within our industry and making it more diverse?
Yeah, I think it's from a very young age. I think having family members and things that were on autism spectrums and other kind of, I suppose, the spectrums across of life as part of my family, it kind of really opened up my eyes to that kind of thing. So whenever I've seen an opportunity, I think even when I was a young graduate in Canberra, they had a diversity and inclusion mentoring program where people with disabilities could be mentored by someone, and they looked at the graduates and kind of more junior level employees to be those mentors. So someone who's kind of living the life and the similar experiences to these people. And I put my hand up for that. And so I worked really closely and had an absolutely lovely mentee, and we kind of had the same kind of journey through our kind of early career years together, and kind of was more of a partnership rather than a mentor-mentee relationship, because I too was only really learning about what it was like to be in the workforce. And so from that experience, I think you can do those one-off kind of like programs and things like that and be a part of that. But then I think it's also about empowering when you do get the opportunity to really try and empower that kind of diversity in your teams and your roles. And people, as you kind of move up through the leadership ranks, you get opportunities. So I think when I was in the Western Parkland City team, where I was delivering the Elizabeth Drive in Western Sydney, the team was looking at more of the diversity challenge and noticed we didn't have that much diversity across our kind of government team. And I was one of the few, I was actually at the time, I think it was one of 2 women out of 12 in the leadership team for that. And we noticed that we didn't have any kind of Aboriginal representation in our teams. And Western Sydney has got the biggest Aboriginal population in the whole of Australia. And so I was like, how do we not have that voice in our project teams? And so we looked at really kind of making targeted Indigenous positions in our project teams to really encourage that and let their voice be heard as those projects are getting developed and delivered. And so being in a leadership position, I was able to kind of help influence that, which has been really cool, kind of, as I say before, legacy to kind of leave in those teams. So I think when you get given the opportunity to kind of encourage it and empower those people in those teams, take it. And you can do it at any level. Like I said, I started off as a grad, kind of helping, kind of almost mentor or peer kind of partnership with someone with a disability, all the way up through to now where I'm kind of in the more leadership roles. So, yeah.
Wow, the whole thing with inclusivity and accessibility is genuinely a whole different world that I feel like there's so much work to still be done. Like, it's
Definitely
incredible, and it's probably something that not everyone understands until they have the opportunity to go and talk to someone that's going through that, and not even then they'll understand the magnitude of it. But that's
exactly.
really good, and thank you so much for sharing the family thing. That's really cool. Thanks.
Yeah, that's all right.
Thanks for that.
I think it definitely helped shape me, and I think a lot of people, you get a lot of shape from your youth and your childhood and your family. So definitely is something that I carried throughout my careers with me as well.
Are you originally from Sydney?
Yes. Yeah. I grew up on the northern beaches of Sydney.
Beautiful. Okay. Nice.
Yeah. I was absolutely blessed, but I think it took moving away to realise it. I think a lot of the time, I think moving and living in other places.
Wonder, right?
Would have been.
I am curious because you talked about legacy a fair bit, and you're conscious of it. If you look back, this might be very personal, but what would you say your legacy demonstrates to date?
Good question. It's hard. I think it's something that I can't remember who told me. It's probably some mentor, maybe a family member that people don't remember what you did, they remember how you made them feel. And I just think that's something that I would like to think that people who've come across me have had a positive experience, and that kind of or in some way uplifting them to help them kind of be their best. And I suppose that's something I always strive to do. Whether or not I've done it, I don't know. Have to go and ask the people I've worked with. But I think it's definitely something that I try to do, that kind of, make people feel good about themselves. Because I think if you think that if you feel good about yourself, you bring more to your work, you bring more to your life, and you kind of want to contribute more. So I think that's how we get the most out of our peers and leaders and kind of other teammates as well.
That's really beautiful. Look, from this conversation and from everyone listening, I think your energy comes across straight away. You have an amazing energy. For real.
So, yeah.
So it's really good. You seem like a very energetic person. I love that. So that's your legacy on me today. And this beautiful episode, of course. But straight away, I feel energized. And that's really good.
I was just curious if you were like, I don't know if you have anything planned, but what is next for you beyond the paper that you're writing at the moment?
Yeah, so I'm hoping to share that with industry in the new year. But I'm not 100% sure. And I think if you'd asked me 5 years ago what was next, I wouldn't know that I'd end up here. So I think I kind of are just taking each step as it comes and waiting and seeing what doors kind of open and what challenges kind of spark my interest.
As a listener, I love that.
Same.
Honestly, because you just hear so many people like, no, you need to plan for like 5 years, 6 years, and you need to have all this.
I hate that question, bro. I hate it so much. It scares me.
Not a plan
from just taking whatever's available, and it shapes you in a direction you never thought you'd end up in.
Definitely. I mean, I started in GIS as a scientist that wanted to go and work in the mining industry, and now I'm leading industry engagement with major contractors for New South Wales government. And it just would not have been something that if you'd asked me when I was finishing high school, where do you see yourself in 10 years? Not here. I would not have known. But I'm glad I ended up here because I really, really feel the value, and I'm loving the people that I work with and get to engage with, and really feel like I'm helping kind of shape.
Look, Fiona, we're really thankful that you join us today and share a little bit about innovation and your journey in the industry. It's been a pleasure. As I said, you're very energetic, and thank you so much for leaving that energy with us today. We are super keen to know how you go next year with the Roads Australia. So please share it across, and we'll help you also reach different audiences if needed, because you're already very everywhere.
I never pull up after the award.
I know she's, but we can continue to spread the word.
No, definitely.
Share the lessons and the learnings. I think we need to get better at doing it.
What's so I have a question about lessons learned. Do you think that we don't do them enough?
I think we do them, but they're seen as a tick box exercise at the end of projects. And we have got some amazing people in this industry that hold a lot of knowledge in their heads. And I think they go from project to project and they impart that wisdom, and it's great. But I do worry with an aging workforce that knowledge is going to get lost. So I think we need to do a better job of getting it out of their heads into some kind of system or portal where we can kind of share it and actually really learn from it. And I think one of the interviewees that I interviewed actually really told me about a portal they developed for the Cross Rail project in the UK with London. It's one of the major kind of rail lines across underneath London. And that project blew out of budget, out of program, and the lessons, they didn't really learn from it, but they learned from it. What they've developed is this portal where they've shared all of their learnings for this project so that people don't do it again. And I just think that's an absolutely amazing resource, and it's public. Anyone can go and look at it. And it's just something that's such a valuable tool, and it would be amazing if we saw more of that and more energy pushed into that side of it, not just the kick-off meetings and getting projects underway. It's that finalising them and the benefits realisation.
My last question, sorry, related to this topic. Just regarding, because you said that we have incredible people in here in our industry, and I do not disagree, there's technically brilliant people, but do you think that we also have to work in how, because you said like we have to find a way of like getting the information out of their heads? Is it that we have to help them get the information out of their heads, or they have to learn how to communicate that information in a better way? This is a hard question.
Both. Both. I think it's a bit of both. I think it's creating the tools and the platforms and mechanisms that encourage them to be able to do it and do it easily. Because if as soon as there's something that's perceived as being a bit hard or kind of challenging to doing it, people will just naturally give up and put it in the too hard basket. So we've just got to try and make the tools and the systems that we do for lessons learnt and sharing as simple and as easy as possible, and wanted for people to be able to kind of do it. And also factor in time and prioritize budget and program to it, so that people actually sit down and do it, rather than going, oh gosh, we've got to the end of the project, budget's gone out, we're already over programmed, no time for doing lessons learned, let's move on to the next one. So I think it's that kind of piece, is really factoring that into your program and making it a mandatory piece that has to happen.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Fiona.
It has been an absolute pleasure.
No worries.
Yeah.
And
we're
good
so
luck
excited
next
to see the
year.
outcomes of everything you do.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's been really good, and I'll be sure to share all of my learnings from the innovation journey that I've been on this year.
If you want to find out what Fiona is up to, we'll just leave you her LinkedIn link in our episode description so they go and support everything.
Thanks. Bye.